Nobody has your best interest more than your parents, but they bought a house 30 years ago. They don't understand that
the current marketplace,
your down payment is the same size as their home purchase, right? And so they don't understand the different contingencies and things like that in a lot of cases, right? I mean, I'm generalizing here.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Ask the expert, right? And even me, you want to talk mortgages and all this other stuff, I'm going to talk a little bit, and I know just enough about the mortgage process to then direct you to a mortgage lender.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Moving Day podcast. My name is Marian, and today we have two special guests. The first guest is Matt Quinlan. And Matt, for people that may hear you for the first time, do you mind giving us a little bit of a backstory on how did you get into real estate as an agent, for how long you've been doing it, and then we'll go to our next guest, Victor Shaves.
Yeah. So I have been selling real estate for just about 12 years now. Started out, my wife was working a sales job in Boston and worked every weekend, and I felt guilty going to barbecues and stuff without her. So I started going to open houses and started thinking, maybe this is something that I want to pursue. And 12 years later, it's been a really good decision.
Stay with the same company,
I've been with Classified Realty Group since the beginning. I interviewed with another company. It was great at the time. It just didn't work out with that other company, but she recommended that I go talk to Maureen Giuliano at Classified, and Maureen was excellent, awesome. She told me Maureen was going to teach me how to do it the right way, and she was right, and it's been great. And about this time of year, everybody starts calling, oh, hey, I'd love to talk to you about your sales and see what we can do to make 2023 better. I'm like, I'm staying. I'm very happy where I am.
She's definitely doing something right since you've been there for 12 years, you said?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. And we just got the best of the Reddings again for, 6th or 7th year in a row. Might be even more. I don't know exactly which year, but we have a great company with a great reputation. Lots of, not only the clients, but lots of real estate agencies love working with us and our team as well.
Love to hear that. And then second guest, Victor Shaves with Premium Q Moving. You've been in sales for Premium for how long now?
Wow.
6 and a half years.
Yeah.
Damn, time flies.
We're having fun.
Yeah, so what we want to do is we'll cover the topic of your journey to buy your first house, right? Like your dream house. This doesn't necessarily, I guess to a certain extent can apply to some investors, but this would be for the typical family that wants to buy, their first house. And then you, Matt, of course, you'll bring your expertise with, the mistakes that people should avoid when they're buying their first house, things like that. And then Victor will jump in to kind of present what solutions we have at Premium when situations arise, because we all know it's not as, on the surface you might sound great and everything. It's the journey to buying your first house. It's ideal. Like I remember when me and my wife, we bought the first house, and I've been already in the moving industry / real estate, kind of collaborating with a lot of realtors for a while. And it was still a daunting process, so to say, because you didn't know a lot of the details. So
you're not renting your first place where your buddies come over for some pizza.
Exactly.
This now it's time to move. And I remember moving my first house, and I think I was able to scrounge up 2 friends, and that was it. And it was miserable moving into my first house.
We've heard this story with customers saying like, oh, in situations even customers or people, or companies, or even people that were hired on Craigslist just not showing up and then call last minute. But anyway, we'll dive into those in just a second. So let's see. I'm a person that wants to buy the first house in the Boston area. Regardless, now we're not going to dive too deep into zip codes, things like that, different differences in prices and such. But what are the first couple of things that somebody should plan for? Like starting literally from zero, meaning, how do I find a realtor? What websites to go? Like, do I just based on referrals of other friends that maybe have used a realtor in the past? So, vetting the realtor. And then from there, how much work is the customer needed to do on their end versus, all right, because the realtor will bring a lot of the things on the table in terms of, doing the research, already having the research done, prior to that. So let's dive into that process, and we'll take it step by step from there.
Yeah, buying a house is it's not a process that you do very often. If you're an investor, that's one thing. But if you're buying a house to live in, you're moving maybe 5-7 years, and then not for 20, 30 years, and then that's probably, you got 3 moves in your life. And so whether or not you think you know what you're doing, everything's changing every day. The market trends, what is normal or typical is changing all the time. So keeping aside
the rates now,
right?
That's a whole different episode on its own.
It is. We could go forever, and I've been trying to keep up with. We'll get into that later. But, so realistically, most people are going to download one of those big box real estate apps on their phone, and they're going to look there, and then they're going to click a button and think that they're getting the best information out there. And you've already skipped over a ton. Like, showing a house is not the first step that you should be taking. Your first step should be researching, asking friends and family who have used a real estate agent recently that they liked, finding someone on, those big box sites that have 5 stars.
You can actually
Zillow.
We're not affiliated with any
Realtor,
of them, so we can
Realtor.com. All those big sites that everyone knows, right? They are selling you to us, right? So just keep that in mind that there's a pay to play on a lot of those big sites. And so
on the consumer side, meaning the customer have to pay for the...
No, excuse me. The real estate agents.
Okay.
Right? So in order for us to really pop up in front of you just out of thin air, then there's some money behind that you have to be aware of. So when you click, connect me with the agent, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting the listing agent on that property. You're getting an agent who paid to be highlighted on those sites. So just, be aware of that and understand, because I often get that, well, you're not the listing agent? No, I'm not the listing agent on that.
So, sorry for cutting you off here, but you said something important. So that means if the customer already has an address that they're interested in, so then they Google that address, maybe these platforms run ads, and then, consumers will click on it, and then they'll see that address that they are already interested in, and then these platforms will bring you as the agent, for example, and then from there, the customer calls the office, whatever, right? That's Correct. What we're talking about?
Yes.
So this is the scenario where people already know the address that they're looking at.
Or they did a search and a house popped up and they're like, this is a great house, I want to reach out. It gets really confusing when you're already working with an agent and you think, I don't want to bother my agent, which is a terrible idea. Please bother your agent, right? But they think, I don't want to bother my agent. I'm going to call the listing agent directly. Well, now they're calling a third agent into the scenario, and that gets really messy and confusing. To be honest, if you are working with a buyer's agent, even calling the listing agent adds a level of confusion and whatnot there. So the most important thing, find yourself a realtor. You're going to be best friends with your real estate agent for, 3 to 6 to 12 months. Sometimes I talk to my real estate clients more than I talk to my family, right? Like that's the reality of it. And so you want to know that you're comfortable with this person. They communicate in a way that you relate with, right? If you prefer text, if you prefer phone calls, if you prefer whatever you prefer, you want to know that person is going to communicate with you in a way that you prefer. You want to know that this person is out for your best interest, right? And they're looking out for you. It doesn't matter. I always joke. I have 3 kids to put through college. I don't care if you buy a house this week or next year. Like, it doesn't matter to me as long as you buy a house with me.
Yeah.
Right? So that no pressure, kind of just someone that you're comfortable with. Once you find that real estate agent, it's super important to kind of get an idea. I am all about gathering information and setting expectations, right? You can hear from Uncle Bob, you can hear from your neighbor, you can hear from everybody. Everybody has an experience in real estate. Doesn't mean it's relative to right now. And so that real estate agent that you're deciding to work with has experience right now with what's going on. And that often is going to keep you out of a lot of headaches and whatnot, because your parents, they have your best interest. Nobody has your best interest more than your parents, but they bought a house 30 years ago. They don't understand that
the current marketplace,
your down payment is the same size as their home purchase, right? And so they don't understand the different contingencies and things like that in a lot of cases, right? I mean, I'm generalizing here.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Ask the expert, right? And even me, you want to talk mortgages and all this other stuff, I'm going to talk a little bit, and I know just enough about the mortgage process to then direct you to a mortgage lender, because the mortgage lender is the expert in that world. And so that would be the next step, right? Learn the process, figure out what the buying process is. What's the calendar? I have this really cool calendar that I sit down and go over with my buyers at a first consultation, letting them know when they're going to need money, what money you get back if you decide not to move, what money's gone, the contingencies and what they mean, when you can, what you're looking for in an inspection, the fact that once you sign purchase and sale, the mortgage lender is your new boss. I don't care that you have a day job. Right, you don't lose your day job, but
especially don't
don't change your day job. Don't do anything like that. But the mortgage lender, when they say, "Hey, I need you to get me this documentation," I need it, right? And you need to put that as a priority,
because that can delay the whole process of buying the place. Yeah, we've seen that. I mean, not necessarily that particular thing, but we've seen people booking a move. Let's say. When they have a closing date, and then maybe 2 weeks before, like, we have to push another week or another 2 weeks. So that could be maybe one of the situations. Yeah. All right. So once you set up expectations with them, what's the budgeting kind of process? Like, I know, because some people will say, well, my dream house is that, but then, how much can you afford? Mm-hmm. Right, and then can you afford? And maybe your dream house is maybe you can afford your dream house with this budget in Worcester, but not close to Boston, type of thing, right? So that's another thing. How much do you go outside, or do you prefer to just stay in an area that maybe most of your customers are buying? Maybe, I don't know, closer to a specific.
I put some miles on. So my wife is also a real estate agent. So the two of us, we're both licensed in Mass and New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And we have sold in probably 75 or more towns around Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire. There's a few outliers, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you've been working with someone for a year and all of a sudden they find this one place that they absolutely love way out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they love it. They know where they want to go. Everything, we're able to kind of dig up the information that they need to. Primarily, we've been north of Boston, southern New Hampshire. Okay. But I'm not afraid to put some miles in and do the research that I need to do to.
So you said something really interesting, and then we get this a lot, like people calling to kind of get a quote and see how much their move will cost, just to have an idea, because they not know necessarily how long it's going to take until they will find a place. So you said something like, hey, I don't care if you buy a house next week or next year. Average, what do you see in the current market? Let's say maybe the last 3 years, because the current one, it's maybe different than last year, and then COVID situation was also different. So what is average? What should people maybe just think, all right, if I'm within this many months, it's average. If I'm outside of that, and because again, when we say, all right, first house, you may not want to move for the next 3-6 years or whatever the situation may be, unless you have to for a job.
Yeah, I think as far as timing from kind of that buyer consultation to making offers, and there's so many variables right now, whether it's the inventory, right? Like, the inventory is definitely a problem where there's only so many places to live. Or so many places on the market that you could buy. So that's one hurdle. I think by getting as much information as you possibly can and having a really good expectation of what the process is supposed to look like, really having thought through what it is that you want, what you're willing to sacrifice, make that kind of, get all the information out there as early as possible.
So that realtor.
Yeah, and even having that conversation back and forth, and help you're giving me the information helps, right?
Yeah.
Like it's great for you guys to talk about what you want in your next house, but it helps me to say, no, this is the house, right? Like this is the one you should go for. But if you have realistic expectations and you have all the information that you need to feel confident and comfortable in making a move, it could be in 2 weeks. I had one client, they've done it twice now, where I sat down with them. They came over. We had a great chat about the process. And I'm like, you know what? I really think that you guys belong in this community and this condo community in Methuen. It's a little bit more than your typical garden condo, but the price range is great. And 2 weeks later, the house popped up in that community. I said, guys, and here they are. They put an offer. They got it, right? And so lucky them. Oh. We didn't look at very many houses that time. And then we talked just recently, this past year, we talked, and they had a child, and they were ready to move out of the condo living into a single family. And, I mean, within 2 weeks, they were able to get their offer accepted and get the house listed. And it's pretty crazy. But you have to have that approach, right? If you can't move quickly, it could be really, really hard for you in this current market. But
no, and I totally relate to this because I've had just in Everett, not too far from here, a house for sale, and now after 3 offers, 2 of them didn't go through, and then I'll mention one of the reasons because maybe you get this a lot. It was a pregnant woman. I think when she saw the house for the first time, she was in 8 months, and then the bank. The reason for the bank denying the mortgage right at the last minute was literally even the water and the electrical bill was paid off for her to literally just have the closing like a week later. And then the bank literally denied the mortgage because
employment verification.
Yeah, because she had to stay home for like 2 months, I think, after what's the maternity leave. Or that was her situation, right? And I'm like, but did the bank not know that she's pregnant? And then, kind of connecting the dots when you get the pre-approval. And then now we'll have to actually, that I mentioned all this, maybe we'll dive into this this topic more. Because it did seem a little bit off in terms of the whole thing. Like, the bank was aware of, I thought that they were. Mm-hmm. So what do you think in this scenario? Like, how is, like you just mentioned about this couple that you work with.
So that's kind of where I was talking about that balance of, I know enough to say, that makes me think we need to talk to the mortgage guy, right? And we need to talk to the mortgage person and say, this is the situation. What do we need to do to make sure that this process goes smoothly, right? If you just assume that things are going to, I didn't even think, that is where I need to think for you, right? Because you shouldn't necessarily know that if you're on maternity leave, it could affect things. There are situations that it doesn't, right? It all depends on how your job situation is set up. So there's not a black and white answer. Yeah. There's a specific situation that you are in, and you need to understand what that means. And your mortgage lender should be the one to advise you on how this needs to happen.
But then, okay, so I get what you mean. It was probably some miscommunication between her and the realtor or the agent not knowing how to approach. Maybe they didn't have this before, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a surprise. Like that conversation
had to happen way before.
Should have happened. And, things change, right? There could have been a change in the scenario last minute that became an issue. But
no, but imagine how much stressful this situation could have been for her if she was selling at the same time.
Right.
Like if she
think about how stressful it is just anyway, right? Yeah. She already envisioned the nursery in this house that she was buying.
Oh, she saw the house like 4 times, I think.
Now it's not there because there wasn't a clear line of communication that kept things rolling. Whether it's job change too, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can change a job. You just have to make sure that the change that you're making fits into the guidelines, and you need to don't let your mortgage lender find out from your old boss that you switched jobs, right?
Now, when you say this, switch jobs, at what? Because I know this can actually affect like a lot. We just had this conversation not too long ago.
We did.
So somebody is contacting you. They already saw, maybe you saw a couple houses with them. They decided, all right, we want to do this. And I know, again, this can be a lot of different variables. Like, it's a couple. Are both of them on the mortgage? Is it just the husband, just the wife? Right? Because this, depending, like credit score involved, all that.
Yep.
At one point, you could say, all right, don't change it from this point to this point. Just make sure you do it either before or after.
I mean, ideally, you shouldn't be changing, right? Like, ideally, you're not switching jobs. You're not opening your Jordan. I know Jordan's is probably 7 months out for delivering your couch. You cannot open that $10,000 credit card that they so easily give you before closing, because then you're going to have a couch in 7 months in the middle of the street because you don't necessarily qualify for your mortgage anymore, right? You don't. On my little calendar I talked about earlier, the last thing after the mortgage financing date, contingency date, is don't buy a yacht, right? It's a joke, but everybody remembers don't buy a yacht. It's ridiculous. No one's actually going to be buying a yacht while they're buying a house, or probably at all. But it gets them to think about it and remember, don't change anything. And now I say that so aggressively, don't do it. Don't do it without talking to your mortgage lender first. You might be in a situation where you're golden.
You're like maybe
you're
overqualified.
Fine. You have, you're way below your qualifications. Your debt to income ratio is not even close to being pushing the limits. And so you might be able to go and order your Jordan's Furniture card. Just don't do it first. Ask. Let the mortgage lender kind of chuckle at you and be like, that's silly. Of course you can do that, right?
And Matt, is that something that as a buyer I should reach out to the mortgage company directly, or you first before I reach out? Like, how would you want to see that process?
Yeah, I mean, at that point,
that's a good question.
We have our relationship as far as finding the houses, what's going on with the house. I'm kind of the face of it, but once you're gonna be pretty deep into your relationship with your mortgage lender there too, right? And you're gonna have a strong relationship with them. So if it's something like that, I don't need to know your personal finances. Yeah. I don't need to know. That's part of why I don't want to get into the mortgages too much, because I don't want that information that I don't need. Yeah. The mortgage lender needs it, and then he's going to give me a pre-approval letter that says what you're qualified for.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so I think it's probably fine to call your mortgage lender directly. But if you ever question it, that's why I'm here to kind of put you in the right direction.
And then, because when people get to you, again, I'm talking about average, right?
Yeah.
Is the average customer already working with a mortgage broker, or you tend to connect them with one more often than not?
That's a good question. So it doesn't matter to me who you use, as long as the person is getting the job done. The benefit to using one of the mortgage lenders that I work with regularly is I can call them at 10:30 at night. And if they know that if I am calling them at 10:30 at night, I need them to answer.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not just calling to, shoot the breeze and have a good time. And I mean, sometimes, but most of the time, if I'm calling them late, it's because something came up that needs to be addressed. And so I'm going to get that response. You're going to get a great experience because
you've already worked with the guys.
I've already worked with them. I know that they are great. They want to continue working with me. And so they're going to make sure that your experience is great, so that you tell me that the experience was great, and I continue to send clients their direction.
Makes sense.
That top of the pyramid, the real estate agent is at the top of the pyramid, a lot of referrals. Yeah. I mean, for you guys, it's not very often that the buyer's like, let me call a moving company first. It's more, hey, I think you need to call this moving company because they're great and they're going to save you a lot of headaches.
Right. And so because you touched on the subject of pre-approval letters, right? Mm-hmm. Like I know, I don't know exactly how many open houses I've been involved, me personally, and also in a couple of situations where we had maybe some real estate partners that we maybe sponsored or so. But do you, as the agent, when somebody comes to you with a pre-approval letter already, so they have the pre-approval, right? How much do you vet? To what extent has the mortgage company done their due diligence and actually offered that pre-approval? Like I've seen it just now in the last 3 months. Like the first two people that literally put an offer down, offer was accepted. 2 weeks later, realizing that, oh, actually, they're not going to qualify for this. So they're going to, and I'm like, it's missing here. Like,
so I mean, that's, if I'm the listing agent, it's always great when I see a pre-approval from a lender that I know come across the table, right? Because now I'm confident that that person is going to get the job done. I'll call on those when I have the listing. I'll call those pre-approvals, call those lenders, and just get an idea of, I'm going to ask, hey, your buyer's just put an offer, and I haven't had one say, don't accept that one. I haven't had that. But part of it is, did the lender answer? Did the lender call me back? Is the lender going to do their job? Yeah. And that's really important in that vetting process as the listing agent. On the buy side, if a buyer already comes to me and I'm their buyer agent and they have a pre-approval, I want to know a little bit. Like I want to know how you met them. Where did you find them? How have communications been? Do they work 9 to 5, or are they available on a Saturday afternoon when we actually need them? Do you have their cell phone, or do you have an office line? Like, what's that relationship like? Because real estate is not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 gig, and things move quickly, and you need to be prepared. And even if there's an offer deadline, right? So that's a trend that's been happening a lot over the last few years. Offers are due Monday or Tuesday, let's say. I still want my buyer to be able to talk to the lender as soon as we see the property, whether that's Friday afternoon or Saturday. We may not put the offer till Saturday, but again, we're gathering information. I need to figure out what my no number is. I need to know what my walkaway number is. If I'm going to be in a multiple offer situation, I need to know, all right, so if I go here, if I go here, can I afford that? Does that fit into my budget? And we don't have a lot of time to make decisions when the inventory is as low as it is right now. You have to do that quickly. So the more time we can get,
the better.
The better. And then you feel I want to avoid buyer's remorse. And if you thought about something for 3 or 4 nights, you're going to feel pretty good about it the rest of the way. Whereas if I wait to have you talk to your lender on Monday morning at 9:30 after they have coffee because their day starts at 9, then
it's too late for
you don't have enough time to process and really digest what that means.
And I love the fact that you mentioned, real estate is not necessarily a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday thing, because it's true, especially when an offer, like if the open house it's Sunday morning, right, or Saturday morning or Friday afternoon, and then offers are due Monday, but then the weekend, it doesn't mean that you're not able to, like, if you're not able to call the lender, then it's a problem, right? Because you can slow down the whole...
this process is stressful and emotional. And if you don't have information that you need, then you start making up your own information. If you make up your own information, it's probably wrong. And then you're going to be really stressed later when you figure it out, right? The rates, let's talk about, we don't have to talk about the rates a lot, but they change so much right now that what you thought you qualified for 2 weeks ago is not the same as what you qualify for today in either direction, right? Yeah. Sometimes it's moving up, sometimes it's moving down. So you might miss out on a house that you do qualify for because you still have information from 3 weeks ago. Or you might get yourself in a situation where you did qualify and you want to make this offer and now you don't.
That's interesting. So because of the current economic state of and how the rates are moving, even though you get a pre-approval letter for, let's say it's valid for 30 days typically, right? That's what.
Yep.
So you could
30 to 90.
30 to 90.
It depends on.
Oh, I mean, I can only imagine 90 days.
Right. Yeah.
What kind of nightmare we're talking about? But let's say it's 30 or 30 to 90. So you get pre-approved for that amount, and then the rate changes. What do you again, we're talking averages now. What do you typically do? Try to negotiate with the seller? You're trying to
So I think you're gonna be kind of touching base with your lender. But my lenders write pre-approval letters for the offer that I'm making today, right? So you're communicating throughout that whole time while you're searching. And then when you actually find the place, you're sitting and talking with the lender again and running scenarios with the current rates. They have some opportunity to kind of predict what's going on with their research that they are constantly doing. And so as far as that, it shouldn't be you're into your purchase and sale and all of a sudden the rate's changing.
Right.
It would be kind of up until you get your offer accepted. If there's a risk involved and if it goes any higher, you're in trouble, they may recommend that you lock, right? And that's what you do there. I was going to say something else, but I forget now.
You'll remember as we
I'm sure
progress through it.
Yeah.
But so since we're at this topic of buying buying your place, some people do find themselves in the scenario where, all right, now might be a good time. I don't necessarily agree that it's a great time at any point in time. It's a great time for you, for whatever the
100%. There's not a great time.
It cannot apply to everybody. Yeah,
exactly.
But some people are in the scenario where they need to exit, sell their current place. Maybe they need to upgrade because they have a child and now they need a bigger place, right? So they're selling and buying at the same time. How do you advise somebody that has that plan? Do you advise them to, let's just focus on selling this place first, and then based on what the current rates are and whatever, right? So talking 2023 moving forward, then we'll focus on selling it? Or because of the financial situation, they may need that extra money that they build?
People who are selling don't automatically think, I need to talk to my mortgage lender. You need to talk to your mortgage lender. You need to know where you're going and how you can afford to get there. Do you have enough money? Do you have enough income? Do you have enough room to carry both mortgages for a short time? Then that's ideal. Now you don't have to stress about kind of how you make that transition. I think one of the most important things that we can do, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here are your scenarios. Here are your options. You can try and sell your house with a suitable housing contingency that says, I'm going to sell you my house, but if I can't find somewhere to go, then you get to back out from that deal. There's some downsides to that, right? You're limiting your buyer pool. Not everyone is willing to wait for you. Or they're willing to wait for you, but they're only willing to wait for 3 weeks. So if you don't find something in 3 weeks, now they're walking away and you're starting back over. You're back on the market, some of those things. So there's some headaches there. You could make an offer subject to you selling your house. You might get laughed at right now. Well, maybe not as much right now. Anymore. I've done it a few times
during COVID
recently, but last year it was pretty hard to get a home sale contingency accepted. There's again some strategies that we can do to get ready, so that it's maybe a little bit easier to make those things happen and sell it to the listing agent or the seller on the property you want. There's simply selling your house and finding a short-term situation, whether you're living with family or an Airbnb or, a resident. I mean, there's all different things there. You can call Premium Q and talk to them about their long-term storage. Situations. And so then we need to get into it. We need to talk to the lender, say what are my options, and they're going to tell you what you can do. They're going to tell you, yeah, you're fine. You can afford up to this. You have this much money down. You should be all set. Go find a house. Or they're going to say, I'm sorry, you need the funds from your house that you're currently in to be able to make that
another offer. So since we are at this topic, with potentially selling the house and then buying another one, Victor, I mean, you've probably got this situation a lot of times where people tend to freak out when they realize, we were able to get an offer accepted, close on the house that we're selling, but we're not able to move in on the next one for multiple reasons. How often do you get this question?
Yeah, so more often than not. To begin with, when you're buying and selling a house, it's complicated, to begin with. So it's very, I wouldn't say rare, but I would say probably about 60 to 75% of moves are done with some sort of, short term, whether it be an overnight hold or storage. So I always tell customers throughout this whole...
Sorry for cutting off. Dive a little bit into, because we might know these terms, but people might have no idea what overnight hold means.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always tell customers that the easiest part of this whole process is figuring out how the moving company is going to deal with that, kind of short-term storage or just overnight hold. So basically what an overnight hold is exactly what it sounds. It's us picking up your belongings on a certain day and then leaving it into the truck overnight and then delivering it the next day or, maybe even a day later than that. So that is when you have a closing, like say the closing's November 28th. You obviously have to be out of the house the day before so you guys can do the walkthrough. So we come the 27th, pick everything up, keep everything in the truck overnight, and then deliver it the next day, usually in the afternoon after you guys deal with all the closing. So that's probably the quickest turnaround that it can be. And then from there, obviously storage can be anywhere from a week, a month, 3 months. A lot of times you don't have a certain date when you're going to be delivered because you just don't know. You haven't found the house that you're going to buy. So that's where long-term or short-term, any type of storage comes in. And that's basically just like it sounds, us offloading into a storage unit and, keeping it safe until you find the new place.
That goes towards the expectation piece again, right? Because you see on your contract to purchase closing date of November 28th, and you think, I got to be out November 28th. Well, no, the closing happens on November 28th, right? And you have to be at that closing, and
you have to be broom ready. What is it called?
Broom swept, yeah.
Broom swept, yeah.
And that has to happen earlier in the day so that you can get on record. You can't come and empty your trucks until we're already on record. Yeah. So if there's any delays there, then you need to have the final walkthrough, which pushes you back to the night before. Yeah. The morning of is really going to be stressful. If you're moving out the morning of, how long does an average move from you pulling up to you pulling out take?
So typically if it's, a 2 to 3 bedroom house, you're looking at least 5 to 6 hours, for everything to be at the actual residence. So anytime we get a customer that will ask us, our closing's on 28th, we want to move that morning. We go, no, you don't. You want to move the day before. And then go, 28th is kind of our date. So it's so much easier and it's so less stressful for you, for us, for definitely you as a real estate agent to have everything done the day before. That way, if it does take a little bit longer, you're not stressed out about it. It's not like a ticking clock for you waiting for the walkthrough. So definitely just easier all around, just doing it the day before. Right.
No, and I like the fact that, all right, you have this calendar where you kind of set expectations for people to have an idea about, all right, this is a timeline or potential timeline that things should kind of move forward. Mm-hmm. But if things need adjustments, you kind of have to,
things happen, right? There's lots of people, there's lots of situations that are merging into one scenario. There are guidelines. I think I told you about this, the TRID regulations. So what is it, 6-7 years ago, federal government put in regulations that you have to get your closing disclosures 3 days prior to closing, and you need to acknowledge receipt of those. So that's coming from your mortgage lender. And if you don't get those and you don't acknowledge and sign that acknowledgement, then those 3 days starts the next day. And,
oh, wow.
And you're going to, there's nothing you can do. The lenders get huge fines if they don't meet that 3-day minimum on getting you the closing disclosures. So those are things that are out of control. I mean, it's not really out of control. Somebody that's responsible for that needs to be on top of that. But if I had it happen this year.
The email goes into spam. And if you don't get the email back with the signatures on the paper before end of the day, somebody should call.
Yeah,
I was the listing agent, and the buyers didn't acknowledge the closing disclosure in time, and the closing had to get pushed back a day.
At least it wasn't 3 days.
Well, I mean, think about it. You often schedule that closing on Friday. Well, most people do. I try and schedule on Thursdays, but if it's on Friday and you miss the date, now you're getting it's Monday. It's not Saturday. Yeah. You can't do closings on Saturday. You can't do them on Sunday, and you've lost your whole weekend and all the 2 friends you were able to, help you unpack.
That's interesting. So these disclosures, I'm assuming now I remember the last 2 transactions that I did, everything was done online. Like, I think I only had to be in person one time with the real estate attorney to kind of, the power of attorney and things like that. Other than that, I was not required to be.
If you're on the sell side, everything's going to be done power of attorney.
That was on the selling side.
Yeah. On the buy side, you do have to be at the closing, present. And they're going to ask you, are you doing this at your own free will? And your realtor is going to try not to make a joke about it because it's a very serious question and you can't joke about it.
So what's the joke?
No, they ask you, like the attorney will ask you, you're signing of your own free will. No one's forcing you to sign all that, just to make sure that you're
real estate agent isn't holding a gun under the table.
Exactly. And, you get the funny person who always wants to make a joke and say, oh, no, she's definitely making me do it. And that's it. Closing's done. Like, you got to.
Wow, you kidding me? Like, these things happen time to time?
And I'm sure that there's some level of, like, sense of humor, right? You get a sense of the sweating on the eyebrow. No, I'm really being forced to do this, or the joke. But if there's any doubt in that attorney's mind, so it takes me a lot not to make that joke.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. All right, so since we are at this this kind of topic of kind of first-time buying, even though we talked about people maybe selling and buying at the same time, is not exactly the first-time buying experience. But let's say you want to upgrade and you realize, all right, I'm not able to afford, an extra bedroom in this area. What are the things that people should kind of look for? And I know, again, we're talking about averages because if you're a couple and you don't have kids, you don't care about schools yet around the neighborhood. But if you do have kids, then you do care about schools and all the other things, right? But what are other things that people may not consider, and you might find yourself into the scenario of an advisor? Because at that point, you're not just a real estate agent, right? Like, you act as an advisor, like, hey, guys, maybe you should. Because if someone wants, typically, from my experience, is the wife that would say, no, I want this yard this big, and maybe I want a pool or a potential place that we can build a pool, whatever, right? What do you see? What are the couple things that maybe people are not considering, and then you find yourself into kind of bringing this up?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, now you've got your budget in mind, and you've got your wants and needs all mapped out, right? And that priority list is going to change every house you go see. You're going to be like, well, maybe the yard's not as important as the kitchen, or vice versa. I can change the kitchen, I can't change the yard, or whatever. And so then you start to kind of push that sphere out further and further till those things match and those meet, right? The price point. And when I say further, you've got Boston, right, is expensive, and then you want to go out to Winchester, right?
Which is still expensive.
And it's still expensive, but you get a little bit of yard.
Yeah.
Now you want a big yard, so now you're going to, well, big compared to the city, you go to Wakefield and Reading, and then now you really need to push that space a little bit. You don't want to ask your neighbor for sugar through the windows, and so you come up to North Andover and live in the woods. So when you're doing that, depending on where you're coming from, one of the big things that is super helpful is doing a drive-by, right? You see a house that you like, go drive by, because you may look at the neighbor's house and say, I'm out. I'm not buying that house. I don't want to live next to that neighbor. And
I pause you here for a second just because this happened, I don't know, 2 months ago. One of the showings was on Sunday, and the neighbor next door just had a party, like a birthday party, like a blast, like 20-something people. Music was going through the speakers, and it just happened. I wasn't even home, so I was not aware. And then the agent called me halfway through, and I'm like, Marian, can you call the neighbor somehow and just tell him to leave, put the music down for like an hour until the open house is done? I'm like, oh, I didn't, these are things that you, like I never.
Right.
And it pushed a couple of people off. Like, there were some comments saying like, oh, no, there's no point to stay and look at the house because this is not what I want.
That's the lifestyle that they live, and it's too close to where I live, and I don't want to live that lifestyle. Yeah. And so they driving around morning and night, right? Go drive by during the day and then come back through in the evening when it's a little busier and see what it's like. But sometimes as you're starting to expand that bubble, it's not convenient for you to just go drive 45 minutes. I mean, you can certainly pull up Google Maps and look at the bird's eye view and the street view. Caveat to that neighbor piece, I've seen quite a few listings that, like, in the disclosure it says, neighbor's yard has been cleaned up because when you look on Google Maps, it looks like a junkyard, but it just hadn't updated yet.
Like, because Google Maps actually. How do they pull is it pulling from MLS?
So I mean, when you're Googling the house, right? Then you'll have the new photos that are on the MLS.
So all the new photos will get updated?
But I'm talking like when you go to Google Earth or Google
satellite
Maps and you look at the satellite view and all of a sudden they've got 7 cars piled up, but it's a year-old photo. They haven't redone it recently. So, I mean, there is that bit. But you want to start looking for power lines and railroad tracks and water and other things that you can see on that Google map, because there's nothing worse than pulling up to a house, getting out of the car, and be like, I can't deal with the power lines. The power lines have been there forever, and we should have known about that before we walked through the door and made the seller clean their house and leave their house. And that it's always a really awkward conversation when I talk to the listing agent and give them feedback from the showing, be like, actually, we didn't go in. And in fact, I tell my buyers, no. Let's go. We're going to go. We're going to give them some valuable feedback. They came out and they left their house. So,
oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't realize. Now,
I've heard you say that quite a few times, right? And that's the point, right? Somebody has one experience. You have a lot of experience in real estate, right? Like there's
only four properties so far, but
but
a lot of things came up.
That's recent, right? That's fairly.
That's why everything is fresh in my mind.
Right. And even you didn't realize a lot of these things that happen throughout the process. And that goes back to the beginning of talking to Uncle Bob or whoever. Poor Uncle Bob. I mean, I don't have an Uncle Bob, so that's why I use that term. But Uncle Bob is the troublemaker in my world. But he doesn't know. He hasn't been involved in it. He did it once, and it was only one transaction with one set of sellers. 250 plus sales, and I can tell you every seller and buyer has been incredibly different. Yeah. Right. That's the psychology of real estate.
I don't have an Uncle Bob, but my dad, who's in Europe. I remember when me and my wife bought the first house, and we were, I don't know why, for some reason, prices here versus a small country like Romania, where I'm from, don't make sense. Like sometimes you're better off just not mentioning the price points because they don't align with. Anyway, so I remember when I mentioned the fact that, all right, we're gonna buy this place. We're actually getting close to move in, and he was like, "You gotta be out of your mind. Why would you pay that for?" And I'm like, "Dad, with all due respect, I love you, but me growing up in a one-bedroom condo, it's different than where I live now and the plans. And frankly, I won't find a $20,000 house around Boston, okay? So we have to... So again... now, if
I'm the real estate agent, and my father-in-law did that to us on our first purchase, right? I mean, granted, it was my first ever real estate transaction, so I didn't have a ton of history, but he came over to see it after we bought it, and he
just pointed all the negatives.
I mean, Sonia was sobbing. She was so upset. I mean, the house was a mess. So it's like, but what it was, and then what we sold were two completely different houses, and it got us, you know, the benefits of home ownership and the benefits of the last 12 years, right? So it got us a ton of equity to be able to get out of our student loan debt, right? It got us out of a lot of our credit card debt that we had built up through the wedding and all that fun stuff. And, you know, we bought it for $270, and 4 years later, we're able to turn around and sell it for $425. Nice. And if we had listened to Uncle Bob, right, we wouldn't have bought the house, and we wouldn't have built all that equity because it was not a good deal at the time. Listening to the people that are in real estate every day and seeing the trends and understanding what's happening in the different towns, you'll learn, no, this is an actual opportunity for you to build equity and get yourself better and make a better life for you and your family.
And going off, sorry to cut you off, Mary, but going off of that, and just like a side note, as a buyer, especially first-time home buyers, where should that be in your mind about, okay, we know we want to have kids, you know, in 5 to 10 years. We know that this is not going to be our, you know, quote unquote, forever house. Where in a buyer's mind should, okay, we got to plan on when we do sell this to make money kind of thing, and, you know, not so much how those opportunities come about, but where should that be in a buyer's mind when they buy their first house?
Yeah, I think you want to consider resale in that situation, right? You might be able to get a great deal on a house that backs up to power lines or is next to the train tracks, and yes, you're buying something, and you're going to be paying down the principal while you live there. The market, it's crystal ball talk. We don't really know.
Nobody can.
A lot of the projections are still projecting 5%, increase in the values of the homes every year. And if you look, prices haven't come down. They've bounced, but they haven't come down. And so they're still projecting that you're going to be seeing an increase in the values of the home over the future. I think you need to understand how much risk you're taking when you're making that offer on that first house, if it is a short term, right? If it's a 20, 30-year house, between you paying down your principal and the market going up and down, the value when you're living in a house for 20, 30 years, it doesn't matter unless you're selling, right? It doesn't matter if the market goes down $100,000 because you're not selling, so you're not using that, right? Right now, it's crazy. If you're selling in a year, you need to consider whether or not that makes sense financially for you. And so, you need to kind of have that long-term, short-term planning in place when you're making the decisions and how high you're going on your offer. And maybe you can get a situation. Houses that aren't perfect are the ones that are sitting a little bit right now. Houses that need work, houses that have things, you might be able to negotiate a little bit there and move forward. Just remember that when you go to sell, some of those issues that are there now that you're willing to overlook
are still going to be there.
There, and other people might not be able to overlook them. I had a client in Wakefield who was up against the highway, and he had all these grand plans, and I love him. Like, the guy was so excited, and he made his dreams come true. He talked this into existence. But I as soon as we saw the house, I said, you have a cap on the value of this house, right? There's only so high that you're ever going to be able to go because you're up against 95.
Yeah.
And it if I didn't set those expectations throughout the whole process, between his wife and I, kind of tempering that, I think it could have been a lot more difficult for him throughout that whole process.
And I just want to make sure I follow here. So you mentioned the fact that the value of that house can only go as high because he was close to the...
It was close to the highway. It was super small. Like there was
noise-wise?
Noise-wise.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking, if I buy a house and it's close to the highway,
convenient.
Yeah,
right?
I'm thinking it's close. I can just get on and off the highway.
So there was no on-ramp. It was just the highway.
Oh, okay.
So there wasn't that convenience there. It was just the noise factor. And again, everybody has a buyer. It's just how many buyers do you have? And if, obviously, the more buyers you have for your house, the more the value is there. If you have a smaller buyer pool, it's going to take a little longer to find that buyer that is excited about your house.
I would imagine highway there is a big, that
was
maybe
the
not cuts
feedback
it in
I got.
half, but takes a lot of the buyers out of that right away.
Right. And I think one of the things that sellers need to kind of understand right now in our current today, I'm saying current as in today, because I don't know what next week is going to bring as far as the buyer activity. But over the last few years, you had a front door with a doorknob. Like, that's all I needed, right? Like, I'm buying that house. Now, your buyers are set up in temporary housing. They know that they're going to be maxing out their budget because of interest rates and cost of contractors and work. They have all the information that they need to make a wise decision for themselves, and they're not going to overpay. They're not going to buy something that doesn't fit into what they're looking for just because they need a house. They've been patient. They've been looking for a long time, and so you just need to set that expectation that if there's something going on with your house right now, if you can address it, and if you can't, you need to address it either with the price or the amount of time that your house is going to be on the market while you find that buyer.
Yeah, another, I don't know if I should call it necessarily mistake. Like, I remember during the, whatever you want to call it, during the COVID real estate market, everybody was literally waiving inspections because I don't know, maybe I placed 4 or 5 offers. Only one of them got accepted, and that was like right at the end of the rush kind of scenarios. So it was almost, I still waived the inspection, but then I realized actually I made a mistake waiving it because a lot of things came up after I got the house, realizing that, damn, I actually rushed a little bit because if I would have gotten that inspection, all of these things would have came back, and I would have probably reconsidered the fact that, okay, the amount of, the amounts that you're required now to put in for, everything being so much more expensive in terms of materials and construction and all that, and then services as well, because a lot of things kind of went up. So a lot of things that made sense, last year might not necessarily make sense now.
Everyone has a different skill set. Everyone has a different wallet. And those things come into consideration on whether or not you are comfortable making that decision.
Or
right?
not, yeah.
When I go over my calendar, I talk about what the inspection looks like, right? So what are you doing in an inspection? You're looking for safety system structures. You're not looking for scuffed floors. You're not looking for loose doorknobs. You're not looking for some of those things. Right? You're looking for structural safety concerns systems. And when you get that inspection report is for your information. A lot of buyers will say to me like, oh, well, what if it doesn't pass inspection? Well, there is no pass or fail inspection. It's information for you. It's not for anybody else. It's not for the seller. It's not for your lender. It's for you as you prepare to own this home. You know, my home inspectors talk to the buyers and walk through the house as if they're in their own house, because that's what's happening. And so you have three options from an inspection. You can say, I'm out. See you later. Yeah. Right? This house is falling.
As long as you put the contingency in there.
As long as you have the contingency, right? So we can talk about kind of the waiving piece of it, right? But I'm out. I'm walking. I can't buy this house. I can't afford it, right? You put in writing, subject to unsatisfactory home inspection, we're withdrawing our offer and we'd like our deposit back, right? That's still an option if you waive your, well, hold on, I'll get there in a minute. The other option is everything I found in this house I was expecting and I'm happy moving forward, right? And that's really where you want to be. You want to take a good look at the house when you go into it so that you expect things that you're going to find. You're not getting a perfect house. I've done inspections on new construction houses that are not perfect, right? You need to kind of expect, if you're buying a house that was built in the 1960s, that there are going to be issues. But you're okay. You expected them, and you move forward to purchase and sale. The third option is, I still really want the house. I just wasn't expecting these safety structure system issues to come up, and I'd like the seller to help me with them. So then you go and you can either ask for a closing cost credit, or you can ask for repairs to be made, and you send that. We send that over to the listing agent, and then the seller has three options, right? The seller can say, yes, we're going to do everything you've asked of us. There are probably issues that are going to continue to come up with future buyers, and so they know that you're going to move forward if these are addressed, and they'll take care of them. Option two, no. I'm not doing anything. The seller is under no obligation to make any repairs that you're requesting. Again, by having this conversation in that calendar piece, buyers aren't surprised when they say no, right? Often, if you don't have that conversation first and they say, well, the seller has to fix these. No, you don't have to buy the house. That's the only option here. And then you have option three. Listen, we'll take care of A and C. We've been living in the house for 30 years with that issue the way it is. I'm not fixing it. We'll take care of A and C. You take care of the rest. And then you decide whether or not that's okay for you. Yep. So, I mean, that's how the inspection process is supposed to go. The waiving of inspections, it's not something that I ever recommend, right? It's not something that I say, hey, you're going to have to waive your inspection to buy this house. The furthest I would go is say, this is a really great house. I think someone might do it, but that's just that you should do an inspection because this is a really large investment, right? And again, by saying this house is so neat, clean, new, everything's in great shape, I think somebody might do it. You're not surprised if the seller comes back and says, sorry, we accepted another offer. And you can sleep at night. The inspection is important to you. You're not willing to waive it. You can sleep. You can move on. You'll be bummed out, but you're not going to be like, oh, shucks, like, what did I do? I made a mistake. I've had buyers waive the inspections. It's something that they need to be comfortable with, and they need to talk to the people in their life that make those decisions and have the skills or the money to resolve issues that come up.
Yeah, like we said at the beginning of this episode, it can be great for you, a great choice for you. It doesn't have to be great for everybody to kind of fit the scope of it. So, last question before we kind of wrap things up: out-of-state buyers, people, let's say, moving to Boston for any reason, going from a job change to whatever you can think of. Actually, let me ask you, like, what are other than the job change, what do you see people moving into Massachusetts? Are typically returners, people that lived in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have those people that move away with the grass is always greener on the other side, and then there's a hurricane, and they're like, "Well, we don't have those up in New England. I'm coming back. I'll take some snow instead of that." Or a lot of times it's family. They get homesick. They miss the things that they're comfortable with. The landscape is more attractive here than maybe somewhere else, or whatever. There's reasons, but family, jobs. Those would be some of the reasons why people are coming back.
So let's say a family moving here for a job change, and they've never been here before. Maybe they don't have family. Maybe they might have some friends, possibly, or not. But how do you approach? Do you approach things differently with them? I don't know, in terms of like advising them on a lot of different things versus, or maybe you doing your research on the state that they're coming from. Do you work with? I didn't even ask you this.
Yeah, we've had a few
out of state buyers.
It's not a frequent thing that we've done, but we have had quite a few people that are moving to the area. We've utilized FaceTime and showing time and things like that. It's certainly been
right, for showings, yes.
Yeah. So I had actually my Sunday school teacher just moved back from Georgia, and they did not see the house that they bought in person prior to.
Everything was done through FaceTime?
They closed on the house before they actually saw it.
Wow.
Stressful. Their phone, they called after, like that evening, and I just started sweating.
Oh.
And then they were like, "This is awesome. This is exactly what we wanted. You made it sound like the cabinets were in much worse condition than they actually are." I was like, "Well, that's what I want. I want to set expectations low so that they get blown out of the water and you're not. Yeah, I want you to be surprised in a good way."
Yeah.
But yeah, we did. It's hard. It's hard because you start going into certain areas and certain towns, and your service.
But in our
right, what we got in Georgia versus what we're getting
but in Florida
up
is
here.
different, but in Cali is different. But
but the showing, the virtual showings and FaceTime, it's all of a sudden the service cuts out. Well, let's not go in the basement here because I'll send you a picture of the basement. You're certainly limited. But there has to be a level of trust if you're going to do that, right? You need to. I have known them my whole life, and so I know what they want and what they're looking for and what they're willing to deal with and what they're not. I think it's super important. Zoom meetings are great, right? You can really get to know a lot about a person just by seeing their face versus talking on the phone. But the more information that you can get, the easier it is to make those decisions. I'm thinking, like, how many clients have not seen the house? The other one was my sister. I made an offer on a house for my sister.
What is she based on?
She lives in Windham, New Hampshire.
Okay.
But she was in Georgia for training when the house became available and had a big price drop. And I was like, Jenny,
this is it.
This is it. Like, this is what you want. You want to be in southern New Hampshire, but you still have to get to Boston. This is Windham. You've got a little pond. You've got some really cool, like, you're going to feel like you're on vacation when you finally get home from working your 24-hour-a-day job in Boston. I actually sent my wife to the beginning of the inspection. I said, Sonia, you go. If she doesn't like it, I'm not coming. But again, she liked it. We were overly cautious and gave them all the information that we could.
That's always good news. All right, so for people that are looking to maybe buy their first place, or maybe their second, in the next 3 to 12 months, let's say, and I know this can change. Maybe we have this conversation a month from now, and maybe you'll change some of the things that you'll say now. But let's give people maybe one thing that they can do right at the end of this episode. So they watch this or they listen to whatever the platform of their use is, and they say, all right, what is one thing that I can do? Even something as simple as make sure you don't just use Realtor.com, you also use Zillow and another app or whatever. Like whatever.
Yeah,
you can
I mean,
think
I have
of.
a fantastic website. It's up to date. You're not going to click on that listing that's 3 years old and reach out to somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about.
So perfect. One thing that they can do at the end of the episode, and then one thing that they can, I mean, not one, and multiple things that they can do for the next couple of weeks to make sure that, one, they find and connect with the realtor that they want to work with, and also maybe identify a few things that, you know, you can save them some time or maybe some headaches throughout this journey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's ever too early to set up a buyer consultation with a real estate agent, right? It's all about gathering information. I don't see, I always joke, God's not making more land, builders aren't building more affordable houses. This is the market we're in for quite some time. I don't see how the supply and demand is going to change. And so get as much information as you can, as early as you can, so that you can wrap your head around what you're getting yourself into. And as soon as you have that information, the houses come on and they go off pretty quick, right? Even today, they're still coming on and going off pretty quick. When I started 12 years ago, it was 76 days on market. Today, it's, I mean, maybe there are some houses on there for 30 days, but everyone says, wow, what's wrong with that, right? You know, the good houses are still going under contract in 7 days. So set up that buyer consultation, get as much information, learn what you should expect throughout the process, and then set up a meeting with their go-to lender and continue to build up that comfort level with the process. And as soon as you do that, when the house does pop up on the market in 3 weeks that you want to buy, you're ready to act. You know, it's going to come on Thursday afternoon or Friday afternoon. Maybe offers are due as they come in. Maybe they're due Monday or Tuesday. Regardless, 5 days is a short amount of time to make a major life-altering decision. So now get there, get yourself ready and prepared as soon as possible, because I think, you know, Barry Habib is this big mortgage expert economist. He's won 3 Crystal Ball Awards, and you know, he's predicting that the rates are going to be down at the end of quarter 1, beginning of quarter 2, and the only thing that's changed over the last year, or whatever, 9 months, is the rates. The supply hasn't changed. Like, there's not more houses. They'll tell you, the inventory will tell you that there's more houses. We still have way too few houses available. And so if the rates come back down, what does that lead to? It leads to the exact same situation that we've been in for the last few years, where the rates are now attractive and the inventory is low. You're going to have that buyer demand peak back up. There's only so long that people can be hiding in their closets, sleeping in their grandmother's basement, right? They need a house.
All right. And then if people want to reach out to you personally to connect with you, maybe have that buyer consult, hire you, things like that, where do you prefer them to go? Is there a web? And we'll make sure to list all the links in the description below, but just to...
Yeah, so I mean, my website is qrealtorma.com. My phone number is 978-827-8268. And my email is qrealtorma@gmail.com. That's probably the easiest because it matches the website. They all come right here to my phone. So whether you're on Facebook Messenger or text message, email, that's how you can get a hold of me.
Perfect. We'll make sure we'll list them in the description below. Victor, same thing to you for people that are already in the process of, you know, buying and selling at the same time, because I feel like that's the one thing that we encountered in a lot of situations where we feel like people are freaking out and then we have the solution already, but maybe they not be aware of it. What do you feel it's one thing that they can do, maybe a phone call, maybe an email to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, just kind of like Matt said, it's never too early to start any of the process when you're relocating. It's such a stressful, you know, kind of situation, and it's very time consuming. So the earlier you start it, just the easier and better off it goes. So when you're looking at places, don't feel like you need to have an offer on a house before you call a moving company. Call us. Get a quote. We'll tell you all about the process. Again, we'll be there to, answer the phone no matter when it is, to answer any questions that might come up. So you can go find us on our website, www.premiumq.com. You can always give us a call. I'm sure it'll be listed, everywhere in this podcast. But just reach out to a moving company, give us a call, ask any questions that you might come up. If your move is 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, even next year, give us a call. We're always here to help.
And if you forget what he just said, you can just email me and I'll connect you to Victor.
Love that. All right, guys. So I feel like there was a lot of information in this podcast that people can use. We'll make sure to also kind of chop these questions up into like smaller chunks, and we'll put them up online. But guys, this is kind of a revamp of the show because for a while it wasn't really much content, but now you can expect at least one of these longer episodes every single week. If you guys have any questions, any specific topics that you want us to cover, feel free to put them in the comment section below if you're watching on YouTube, or if you are listening on any of the platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, feel free to put them in a comment or review over there. And the easiest way to support is just to click that subscribe button. But until the next one, peace.